The digital art era is here. AI and art creation tools empower anyone to make it. Blockchain technologies allow anyone to own it. VR, AR, and extended reality immerse us in it. Let's talk to artists and innovators behind the visual magic. I'm your host, Roger Dickerman. Welcome to the future of art. Today, we welcome David Ariew. David is a digital fine artist and educator fondly referred to as Octane Jesus. He has a background across music and film, has created with people in Madonna, has released at Sotheby's, and he has just returned from Digital Art Fair in Hong Kong. He joins us to recap Quantum Transcendence, discuss 3D tools, immersive portals, and boundary-pushing experiences. Let's get to it. David Ariew, welcome to the future of art.
Amazing. Thanks for having me, man. I love everything you do with Artifex and, being a leader in the community, and it's great to be here.
Appreciate you. This interview has been in the works, just so everyone's clear, since 2021. I feel like we first connected at a IRL event, and we said, got to do this interview. At the time, it was NFT origin stories.
Totally.
And here we are 2 years later.
Hell yeah.
Sometimes that's how the space works, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a insane roller coaster ride always. Yep.
Indeed. So the big question, how we start the show, David, what does art mean to you?
Okay, so this one is very difficult to answer, but it's like, because you can say art is everything, right? The design of a house, like the design of my basement that my wife did is art, and so to me, like art, it creates a feeling, right? You want it to elicit an emotion. So like really good art to me, it's either like people will feel awe-inspired or they'll feel, sad or impacted or angry. Like you want to elicit an emotion. And so for me lately, the process has been trying to get my personal art to create more of a feeling, right? To move and graduate beyond something that you just watch and like swipe by and you're like, wow, that's cool. Next, oh, that's really pretty, like that kind of thing, to something that you actually experience that leaves you with an impactful emotion. So like, that's why I've gravitated towards VR, for instance, because it puts you into the art. It like literally transports you into another dimension, and it makes you feel like you're a soul that's like just transcended this realm, and that you're like drifting through these angelic hallways of golden light. And I actually see people affected by this art. So they'll go into the VR experience, they'll come out, and their whole face and their whole being is changed, and they feel more relaxed, they feel at peace. Like I've had responses like, I feel like I was going to heaven, and that I know it's going to be okay when I enter the next realm, whatever the next universe is, right? So to me, I'm searching for, that indefinable thing that will produce like an emotion that will, that people will really connect with. And like as a 3D artist, that's incredibly hard to do. Like, it's such a technical craft where you're setting up compositions in intricate detail and like trying to get every little aspect right, from the lighting, the texturing, all of these technical things that get in your way. And for me, I want those things to get out of the way. And so like the process of discovering myself as an artist has been a really long journey over the last 12 years. Like it took me, I'd say like 7 or 8 years before the tools felt like they were second nature. And like, so that's just the barrier to entry, right? And at first I'm just doing client work, I'm doing stuff that, it's like, yeah, they're great music videos for clients. That's a form of art. I'm doing color grading for feature films, for, all of these different tasks, but it's always in service of a client. Or, maybe it feels like a cool joint art project with someone, but it's not my own personal voice. And like, thanks to NFTs and the past 3 years of going all in on NFTs, like I've been able to discover my own personal art style and what that means for me. So I don't know if like it's a really hard one to answer, man. It's like it's everything, but at the same time, we have to have curators, we have to have people with opinions and like judgments about what's good art versus not as good art, like what's more meaningful versus less meaningful. And and that's where it starts to get tricky, and we start to like to define things and kind of hone the scope of what we believe art actually is. And so yeah, maybe that's a good jumping off point. I don't know, it's kind of a rambling answer, but yeah.
I think it's a great answer, and I want to key in on something very specific. You talked about using art to create an experience for somebody on the other side. Mm-hmm. And I want to go back to March of this year and interacting with you at Beeple Studios, the opening in South Carolina.
Totally.
And I ran into you and you had a VR headset on.
Right.
And you essentially were there in studio. Your art was going to be displayed, which was incredible to see at scale. But you went a level further and you said, hey, jump into this headset and actually get inside the art, immerse yourself in the art. And it really does change the game. It really does change the experience, change the interpretation of the experience that you're creating.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So for 2 years, I've been creating in this style that's more abstract, a bit more, psychedelic. And also it was kind of by the nature of how quickly the space moves. Like I had to reach for these techniques that were really fruitful, that allowed me to design super quickly for all of these insane drops. Like, at the beginning I was like, oh, I would love to go off and spend 4 months creating like this epic masterpiece of a short film, and release that. And then, the perfect collector would find it. But that wasn't realistic in the beginning of this explosion of digital art. And so I reached for this process using these infinite mirror rooms that I discovered, and kind of honed in on that as my own personal style, because I come from this concert visuals background. And, I love syncing audio and visuals together and creating like longer form experiences. But this particular process, I knew that it was fruitful. It actually started with client jobs, interestingly, but one of them was for Keith Urban. And like my normal thing is I'll design 5 or 10 style frames in a day to start, right? But in this case, with this process, I was able to design over 100 frames in a single day. So it was like, holy shit, this is like, if I just change a few parameters, if I change the geometry of the room, what's emitting light, like slight things, I get vastly different looks. And I never know what to expect. So to me, that's another part of art, is that this feels like the most freeing process I've ever stumbled on within 3D art. I was saying before that it's like so technical, and a lot of the time you have to take tons of time planning and setting up a scene exactly what you want. But to me, this is more experimental, and so it's more fun. It's like the most fun I've had in the realm of 3D art. So that's kind of why I reached for it, was the speed and just how fun it was, and the happy accidents, all of the unexpected like results, and it feels like more of a partnership with the software rather than something I'm intentionally designing from the start. So it's more of a process of exploration and revealing the art rather than even feeling like I'm creating it, if that makes sense. So that's just a little preface. But so yeah, when we were at Beeple's space together, it was really funny to me because, I had spent quite a lot of time like designing for this crazy high res, projection surfaces and these LED columns, and making sure it's all, totally rad, and it's going to, start in the center and like kind of wrap around the audience seamlessly and create this, this feeling of being like immersed and surrounded by golden light and something that's really beautiful and uplifting and peaceful. But yeah, I had also just gone down this rabbit hole of creating my first VR experience. And that was actually thanks to my Discord community. So again, let's hop back to February of this year. It was open edition season. Ness Graphics had just dropped his, piece that went, that sold like insane, like $2 million worth of art, right? This huge open edition. And then so suddenly the spotlight was turned back on the artist, which is a rare thing in this space, honestly, because the digital artists have always kind of existed in this bubble that's surrounded by NFTs at large, right? Like JPEGs and, and all of the apes and the PFPs and all the madness of trading. But, it kind of got kicked off by Beeple to a degree. And, there have been many moments where digital artists were very much in the spotlight, but a lot of the time they were eclipsed by the larger happenings of NFTs. I finally feel like we're starting to graduate and set ourselves apart, and the digital art community isn't like really relying on NFTs as the term. It's more like we're digital fine artists. We're, the important thing is that we're yeah, we're digital artists. We've been here for decades, and now we're finally, the traditional art scene and the world is starting to appreciate digital artists as actual artists. So that's its own movement, and I think that has a lot more potential in a lot of ways than whatever the hottest trend is. So we're here for the long term. So we were talking about Nest Graphics and the Open Edition, and so the spotlight finally being on artists for a hot second. So I jumped on that trend with a bunch of other a bunch of my other friends, Ryan Talbot, a lot of these well-known NFT artists. And so I released my own open edition. I sold, I think, 740 or something around that. Like 40 grand worth of art, but I used it to create my own first gamified series of artworks. So it was like you would start with a short piece that was 15 seconds, you would burn 2 of those to get a 30-second piece, and then it's longer and more elaborate, and then a minute long piece. So I was kind of like using Pac's line of thinking of like evolving rather than burning. So I had a lot of fun doing that. And that was the first time I set up my own Discord community. And so the Discord community, they're like, this is fucking awesome. We love this artwork, but have you ever tried it in VR? And to me, I'm very resistant towards learning new software a lot of the time. That might be a surprise for you, but I feel like in the beginning of my career, I was just a sponge, like wanting to do everything. But at some point as an artist, you start to like lose that momentum a little bit. You get, it's more like about the process of just creating more and more jobs for clients, and each job there's a whole new set of problems that you have to solve, and so you're constantly learning on the job, and you're constantly like, I love watching tutorials, I love learning, but I'm not going to pretend that I have the same level of energy as when I did when I was 24 or 26 or whatever, first getting into this, and that I could fully immerse myself the way I did back then, because I have all these other hobbies, I've got a life to balance, there's so much more complexity, and I want to be like a well-rounded person. I think that as an artist, it's very important to take up hobbies and like explore life more, travel, like get out into nature, like find yourself, like, or else what are you going to have to say? Like, what's going to be the meaning behind your art? So that's been a lot of my process lately, is just like literally soul searching and discovering new things about myself, and whatnot. So anyway, they encouraged me, my Discord community encouraged me to, create a VR experience. I was a bit resistant at first, but I was like, okay, let's try this. Like, let's see what happens. So just with the very first still that I brought into my headset, my Oculus, I was like completely floored with how much it transported me into my own art. Right. I'm like, oh, I feel like I'm onto something here. And so I created a test animation that was maybe just like 20, 30 seconds long. And this was in March, I think, just before Beeple's grand opening. And then, I had it as a demo on the headset, and I was running around in Beeple's, studio, like being like, okay, you think this is cool? Like, let's go even further into the art. Let's jump in. And this gives you the added it's like literally an added sense, because you're seeing in depth. So people like look at my work and they think it's some kind of effect, like, oh, that's a really cool mirror effect, that you've done in After Effects or whatever. But they don't understand that these are actual physical simulations of light and reflections. Like, these are actual physical spaces. And the reason I love it is because I'm taking the concept of infinite mirror rooms and abstracting it further, or expanding it further into something surreal, where I can squash and stretch these rooms. I can, have the bevels animate. There's all sorts of things you can do in 3D that brings it beyond what's possible in our world. But the results make me feel like I've cracked open a hole into another dimension, and I'm peering inside, and I just want to keep like creating within that world and revealing more and more what's in there. And because it's a physical simulation, it's also grounded in reality. Like, if you actually built a mirror room with animated bevels, or that like literally had some kind of structure that allowed it to expand, you would get a really similar effect, because we're calculating the exact reflections of how that would happen. And then when you bring it into 3D, when you bring it into VR and you've got the left and right eye involved, now you're seeing depth, and you're actually feeling like you're there, and you're seeing off into infinity, and seeing all of these insanely complex like structures unfold, and it gives you this feeling of, you know, complete vastness. Like this is some like literally you're transported to another dimension. So out of anything I've done in my career, it feels like this is the thing that I'm where I'm onto something that's like really big, that could have, you know, potentially like healing properties for people, you know, whether they're having cancer treatments or, you know, whatever it is, whether it's people that crave meditative experiences where they're in those pods, you know, things like that. And I feel really well prepared for, you know, the Vision Pro coming and all of these, you know, advances in VR technology, where I'll get to upgrade the resolution and just make it really like you've traveled to another dimension. So yeah, I'm excited.
Talk about the differences now that you've dove into VR to the point that, again, you were at that opening with a headset. Like clearly, like hearing you speak about it, you're very passionate about it.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about the differences in experiencing art, or maybe how you create when you know something, let's say earlier on, maybe in the NFT space, where you know something likely will show up on a screen, like the
Mm-hmm.
one you're looking at or like the one I'm looking at.
Totally.
Then you go to concert visuals level, or
Right.
the studio opening level, where you get these
Mm-hmm.
massive high fidelity screens to play with. And then take it a step further. Now you're taking someone into full and total immersion. Are there differences in how you approach those creative processes where you kind of know one of those places will be the end game?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's constraints that prevent you from doing certain things in VR. But then there's also things that you can play with that you wouldn't be able to in with just a 2D surface. So the design is pretty different. So for instance, with a 2D piece, you know, I'm just, for like a couple of years, I was just looking to create more and more. I don't know how to say it. Like at first it was like very much like fueled by weed. It's like I would I would like create a piece of art, and not while I was high, but it was like I would use getting high to like enjoy the piece afterwards. Like I would trip out on it and be like, whoa, like I made this. Like I can't believe I made this. This is crazy. And yeah, my whole career I've always looked for like shortcuts in a way. This is an aside, but like my whole thing is like complexity for cheap. Like I'm trying to get to the best end result possible as a solo artist, because, you know, it's like there's a diminishing return for like trying to compete on the spectrum of the most photoreal or whatever that is, you know, like you know, as a solo artist, you can only do so much. You can't possibly learn every single technique in 3D. It's completely impossible. And that's why, you know, there's so much information sharing in the 3D community, and why there's so many tutorials out there, because there's millions of processes that you could potentially kit bash together to create your own thing. And you need that kind of help, or else nobody would get anywhere. And with like Marvel movies, you know, that's literally like thousands of artists, and we can, you know, and they're super specialized. It's like I'm the guy that made the, you know, raindrops on the brim of that character's hat, you know, and I'm the best in the world at that. And it's like, for me, that's not interesting. That's not who I want to be. I want to be more multidisciplinary and more of an individualist, and, you know, like a true artist. So, you know, that's why it's like when I stumbled on this, it was I'm moving in this towards this realm of like what's unique to me, what's, you know, what's something that the world has never seen, rather than just trying to get the most kind of complex visuals possible. With this process, because of those infinite reflections, you get all of this insane detail that's unexpected, right? And it's actually a very easy, fruitful, you know, process. Like, so I'm always leaning towards those things where I can feel like I'm playing as an artist, but I'm getting all of this insane detail and complexity without having to do tons and tons of work, if that makes sense. So I'm always looking for those shortcuts. And some people are like, well, that's cheating. You need to model every little bit from scratch. And I completely disagree. I think it's more about that end result and producing the feeling, producing, you know, the emotion that you want from your viewer. So yeah, with designing for 2D, it's like, you know, I could do a lot of tricks and shortcuts that would create all kinds of like crazy distortions. For instance, I could like put a mirrored torus like really close to the lens, and that would create this insane warpiness, and then combine that with like a different lenses that are like fisheye or panoramic lens, chromatic aberration. There's all of these different kind of like ingredients that I can throw into it to create more and more like distortions that appear insane and out of this world and complex. But when you try to bring that stuff over into VR, sometimes it'll just give you a massive headache, right? So it's like if I had a torus really close to the lens that's causing all of this sick like distortion, in VR, you see the dimensionality of that exact space that you're in. So this torus is like up in your face and it just immediately is like, ow, like no, you know? So yeah, that's one constraint is like, and you can't move the camera. Like it's like, for the 2D pieces, and I'm calling them 2D in kind of air quotes because we're kind of trying to differentiate between something that's you just view on your computer screen that's flat and something that's stereoscopic 3D where you're seeing in depth. Though all of the pieces obviously are created in 3D. When you've got, you know, like say a frame, you want the composition to be, you know, perfectly designed for that. Whereas in VR, you know, people can look anywhere. So you're literally designing for a fully 360 environment. So for the 2D pieces, I try and create like a point where your eye can fix on, right? It's kind of like they're symmetrical and there's like a center symmetry, so that you can kind of like put your consciousness or your attention into that as like an anchor point. Like and that's also why I've been kind of moving more and more towards this idea of meditative visuals, because when you're meditating, you want something like your breath or the breeze or even the sounds of the birds, like just something to anchor towards, to allow you to like begin again and kind of find that place where you let the rest of the world dissolve. And I think that's what these visuals help you do, is like you're kind of focused on that center point as the one focal point within that scene, you know? And so that helps you, I think, relax. In VR, it's different because you can look anywhere. But the interesting thing is, because I have the visuals all kind of coming like by you, and it feels like you're traveling forward the whole time, people tend to like, they'll put the headset on and maybe they'll like look all around, be like, whoa. But then a lot of the time they just freeze. I see people like just completely freeze because there is still that center point of everything kind of coming at you, and it feels like you're traveling through these tunnels and you're on a journey. So it still creates that same effect, but it is different because people can look anywhere. With the 2D pieces, I can do stuff that's like really, really energetic and fast moving, you know, that's like hyper cutting to the beat and like insanely matched and to the music, you know, and has that more hyped up concert visuals vibe. But in VR, that would make people sick so quickly. Like the second you start doing a barrel roll and like turning the camera all crazy, it completely messes with people's like equilibrium, like that kind of inner ear, right? And it'll just make you feel like you're going to topple over. So you are very constrained in that sense. Like I had a really gentle barrel roll in there at first, and it just made people start to like tip over, you know? But that's okay. Like I'm fine with all those constraints because it's a completely different medium, a completely different canvas to design for. And like you asked earlier, same goes with concert visuals. Like I'm not having to worry about depth there, like the actual stereoscopic 3D element, but you are worrying about like how do all of these visuals sync up and play together in this space, like, you know. And so for me, I love to create like visuals that start in one place and then completely wrap around, and that are seamless from screen to screen and things like that. So there's a lot of technical stuff behind that I've been figuring out. Like I just created that 4-wall immersion room for the Digital Art Fair in Asia. And for the most part, the experience is fully seamless, where you look towards the front screen and all the visuals that come at you seamlessly wrap around to the sides. And then you look behind and it, you know, it's moving away from you back there. So it feels, ideally, it feels like you're in this glass box that's transporting you through other dimensions, right? Versus just having different art on each wall. I want it to feel completely immersive. And it is really difficult to get all those visuals to seamlessly wrap around you like that. So yeah, those are some of the ideas and constraints, I guess.
I want to get to the Digital Art Fair in Asia in one moment, but I do want to make an observation. And actually, the word is observation. I really enjoy the layers of observation that you put into your art, meaning that you attempt to first view it with your own eyes. You're creating the art, but then, like you said earlier, you would then experience the art yourself. And
exactly.
You would get into it and you would say, wow, I created that. That's that. So you're sort of looking at it through a bit of a different lens. And then again, when you are observing others experiencing your art.
Like that's true. That's really,
I really sense that as you're talking about this, whether it's handing me a headset and then just being observational of how I'm experiencing that. And am I looking up, like you said, or am
Mhm.
I eventually just settling in and freezing and pausing and just letting
Right.
sort of the world move by me? I don't know. I find that very endearing that you're looking at
Oh,
it through
thanks,
those
man.
lenses.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not because I'm trying to do that necessarily. It's almost like a selfish thing. Like I create this art because it relaxes me, because it's the most fun for me to watch, so that's why I'm gravitated towards it. And then it's almost like this this bonus that I get to re-experience it myself and like trip out on my own art. And then even more so in VR, it's like I want to go to these realms. These are the places that I'm most interested in, and the places that I want to go. And then I want to share that with the rest of the world, because I think it does create that positive energy, that relaxation, and it completely transports you to a place that you'd never be able to go if not for this technology. So to me, that's almost a spiritual experience. And it's like almost allowing people to have spiritual experiences through technology, which is pretty mind-blowing. Like that's one of the comments I received from the digital art fair. People were like, I never knew that technology could be spiritual before. I never knew that it could, some people felt like it was giving them relief for like death anxiety. Like literally one person came up and was like, is this the spirit path to death? And I'm like, sure. Yeah. Like, yeah.
It is if you want it to be.
Exactly. And then, afterwards they came out, their faces would change, they'd be like more relaxed or just kind of like uplifted in some way. And then, that one person was just like, yeah, I felt like I was moving towards heaven or the next life or reincarnation or whatever that is, and that it's all going to be okay. So it's like there's no better compliment as an artist than producing some kind of emotional, like visceral reaction like that, or some kind of sensation or feeling. I wasn't there for this, but my wife was helping to man like the headset. So just to let you know, the VR experience was like the hit of the entire art fair, even more so than the immersion room, because of how much more immersive it is, because you get that added depth. And then I had the over-the-ear headphones, to like really transport you and take away any feeling of self-consciousness, because a lot of people would come through in big groups, and then it's like kind of awkward. Like not everyone wanted to jump into the VR, or they'd be like, oh, I'm just going to jump in for like 20 seconds. But like invariably anybody that said that would be there in there for like 5 or 10 minutes and having their own crazy like personal experience. And that's, to me, that's just, it's so gratifying as an artist to see, and yeah, there's this one woman I was going to say that my wife was with, and she went in there and she was just completely like, yeah, frozen, but also like just meditative for like, she was in there for like 10 or 15 minutes, and she came out and she had tears in her eyes. And my wife was like, are you okay? And she was like, I'm sorry, I'm having this reaction. I don't know what's wrong with me, but were there voices in there? Chelsea was like, no, there are no voices, like it's just music. And she was like, well, I heard voices and it made me start to remember things, and I'm sorry. And so she just like had to sit down and recover for like 5 or 10 minutes. And to me,
Whoa.
that's just like super, super intense. Yeah.
Profound.
Profound. Yeah.
Wow, man. So wait, take a half step back before we go
Yeah.
deeper on
I need to go several steps back, probably.
digital art fair, right? What is
Yeah.
it? How did it come about? Who were the parties involved? Set the scene for us, because we now have a slice of the experience itself, but just make sure we're all situated on the same page.
Totally. Totally. So I'll jump back to, so let's go back to February of this year, after the whole, open edition season. After that, like I had to go back to client work. I had been full-time in the space for 2 years. Like 2021 was amazing. Like I made tons of money. We were able to finish our basement, like yeah, reinvest in our house and all sorts of things. It was just like, felt like such a time of abundance. And then 2022 was like bear market times, and I was grinding on a project called Diamond Dawn for the whole year. And I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And I mean, it was a really cool concept. It was just, it wasn't right for the market at the time. So ultimately it failed. And I went like from, having lots of extra cash to being 50 grand in debt. And then it's like, shit, okay, it's time, and obviously like the sale in February really helped, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't sustainable. To me, the writing on the wall to me, the writing on the wall was that NFTs weren't going to be sustainable for me full time compared to client work. Like if I can make as much money in NFTs, doing my own personal art, I'm there. But if I'm making less, then it's, you know, and it's becoming less sustainable, that I have to go back to client work. So to me, it almost felt like failure at the time. I was like, oh, that was the last hurrah, you know, never going to sell anything again. Like those kind of like thoughts that are obviously totally stupid, but you know, because all of it's going to come back again. Like, you know, we're in this forever. You know, at this point, I know that like I'm going to be a digital artist forever. Like I'm never going to stop pushing and innovating. But yeah, so, you know, I got back into client work for several months, but on the side, I was testing these VR things. And, you know, I actually created this. I was working with this guy who, during the pandemic, he was like creating visual meditations for people, basically having group meditations, because he couldn't do it in person anymore. And so he was one of the people who had this idea of using that anchor point in the visuals, right? But he connected with me. He was also, you know, in Web3, and he bought some of my pieces on Nifty Gateway, and we had calls. He's a super charming dude from Ireland named Jeff. And so he was encouraging me to slow down the visuals, you know, like, let's take these and make them even more expansive and longer, like let people have like a full, you know, 10 or 15-minute experience. And so I was like, okay, let's re-render. I've got all of these, you know, tons of scenes that I've assembled over the last couple of years, like literally more than an hour's worth of content that I've rendered over the past couple of years in this style. And so, you know, I took some of those scenes and I just extended them out a ton and created this 11-minute meditation piece. It's the longest piece of motion design or 3D art, whatever you want to call it, that I've ever created. So I'm building that. I'm building the VR experience. And then Maker's Place is kind of like knocking at my door constantly, like being like, hey, you want to come do a front page drop with us? And I'm like, not really. I've done that before. Like, and it wasn't that successful. It was like kind of successful, but you know, Maker's Place always had this reputation of being like kind of third or fourth place beneath Nifty Gateway, Super Rare, Foundation. Like Maker's Place was doing really well when I first got into it in 2021, and I got my start with them. But over time, you know, they kind of slipped a little bit, and their secondary marketplace was not doing so hot. So I was just kind of like, you know, kind of pushing them away a little bit, and being like, there was also this kind of attitude amongst artists that now we've got Manifold, we can do our own drops and burns, you know, we've got the keys, you know, we don't need the platforms to be taking 20% cuts from us. What are they really offering us anyway? We've already, like, especially the artists that already had an active community, it's kind of even more decentralized in a way to just be going direct to your collectors and creating your own communities through Discord, and, you know, just using your following on Twitter to generate sales directly with Manifold. It makes sense, you know? So basically, like, they were like, okay, well, in that case, what can we offer you? You know, how can we collaborate? Because they just really wanted to, which was really, you know, I thought was really cool. So I was like, well, can you bring me something that I couldn't do solo? How about an immersive room? You know, how about some kind of bigger installation? Those kind of things. And they're like, okay, let's chew on that for a bit. We'll get back to you. And not too long from then, they came back with this opportunity for the Digital Art Fair Asia. And they were like, Rafiq Anadol went on the same path where he did the immersive room. It's like kind of the peak experience in this whole art fair. And also China is very tech forward, very forward thinking with digital art. They love digital art. There's potentially a market there that's untapped. So we're thinking we do a big show there with you. And I'm like, hell yeah, that sounds amazing. So I created like this 9-minute almost like proposal video for them, basically a video that runs through my entire career, like what I've done in the space, all of my biggest accomplishments in the world of, you know, Web3. And that, so I was competing against other people, and that won me the immersion room job or whatever. And so then I had the task of like taking 2 or 3 months to render all of the content for it. So I created a full 9-minute experience that's completely different. I mean, it's the same like scenes as the 11-minute meditation, but all of it had to be expanded to 4 walls, right? So it took me like 2 or 3 months to render all of that, because the total resolution is like 12K. So yeah, I worked on that for 2 or 3 months. And then also we took the 11-minute meditation. That's a one of one. The VR experience is a one of one that's available. And then we also broke the 11-minute meditation into a triptych and turned the 3 sections vertically. And those were presented as a triptych at the art fair, and it looked really beautiful the way they'd set it up. Like, that art fair was the best presentation of digital art that I've ever seen. It felt like being in a gallery. All of the screens were like 4K OLED, like it was all presented properly. I had several days beforehand to make sure everything was playing back smoothly in the crispest resolution it could possibly be. The immersion room itself was not as spectacular as Rafiq's by any means, because he got the mirrored floor and ceilings and LEDs. They spent a lot more money on him, obviously, because he's a bit more well known than I am and all that. And also we're in more bearish times, so they didn't necessarily have the budget. But we did the best that we could with what we had. And we kind of presented the immersion room as a prototype for, whatever hotel or casino kind of comes through and would want to install that, in their lobby, that kind of thing. So it's like, this is a prototype, but you can imagine how it would look with proper LEDs and mirrored floor and ceilings, and that kind of thing. So, but yeah, it was amazing, because I had this huge corner of the art fair to myself, as well as the immersive room. They would bring through really high-end VIPs, like VVIPs, like the CEO of Ferrari came through and with his entourage, and they had security details, and he hops in the VR experience and comes out 30 seconds later and goes, incredible. It's just super funny. The guy who owned the building, Adrian Cheng, he's one of the richest people in China. He came through with his secret service agent people that I didn't even see, but apparently they were hiding in the shadows, and he bought one of my pieces. So that amazing. Was really amazing. And then it was an incredible experience. And the people in China, I think, part of its cultural differences, I guess, they're really respectful and super polite, and they all had really insightful, beautiful things to say about my art. And I feel like there were just tons of opportunities that sprang from that. Vivian Tam, who's this really famous fashion designer, came through, and she loved the immersion room, and she maybe wants to collab with me on one of her fashion shows. There were just thing after thing after thing. I'm actually designing visuals for a nightclub in Hong Kong right now, taking my immersive room experience and essentially rejiggering it for this nightclub with all these hexagon LED tiles. So with, and that's kind of a similar thing, wrapping people in my art. So that's the kind of thing that I'm just looking to do more and more of. But yeah.
Amazing. So I have to say, viewing it through a screen across social media and through websites, I remember commenting that week. I think this is one of the shining examples of display of digital art in person. And it was one of those things that I was able to say confidently based on the images and videos I was seeing, but it was also something I was able to say with the understanding that I didn't feel the half of it versus actually being there and having that be all around you. And so I couldn't say enough about Digital Art Fair, Maker's Place, just how the whole event of you and Hideki Tsukamoto as well.
Yeah, Hideki's amazing.
Were lifted up. It was a very fulfilling experience to witness.
That's really cool that it came across that way online. And I'm really impressed by Maker's Place. I think that they're the underdog that's coming back. Their new CEO, Craig Palmer, he's been there for about a year now. He's the kind of person that likes to take companies that are kind of on the downtrend and fix them back up and make them fully, well-oiled machines. So his history is he one of his first companies was this one that basically reads the data off of CDs and would display the name in your car. So it would basically take the track lengths, read that, and then match it to a database and present the, just the name of whatever that song you're listening to is. And at the time that was super innovative, and he sold that for tons of money. And then he went on to make the company Fandom, which was also insanely successful. That's basically the Wikipedia of, nerd Star Wars and all the different shows and things and books, and kind of allows fans to build out that lore even more, you know, and apparently it has even more pages than Wikipedia. So that's his history, is like those two companies and selling those. Like obviously he could just retire if he wanted to, but he loves to be on the bleeding edge of technology, and he knows how to build a really great functioning company. So Maker's Place now I think has like 30 or 40 employees, whereas Nifty Gateway and Super Rare, as far as I know, have shrunk a lot in the bearish times. So and then also, you know, he's hired people like, there's this woman named Kat, who she comes from Sotheby's, like directly from Sotheby's. And her only job there is to manage relationships with collectors. And that's not something that any of the other platforms have. So to me, that was incredible. Like she was basically introducing me to all of these really high-end, you know, traditional art collectors who are just getting into Web3. And that's like what we need, is like these people don't, you know, they're not the Bitcoin and ETH nerds that are going to go on and like get excited about burns and all of these different mechanics. They just want really beautiful, you know, cutting edge digital art, and they don't even purchase it themselves. They have like funds and different, you know, people that will go purchase it for them. They're just like, I want this, I want this, I want this, you know. And if we're going to bring in people from the traditional art world, which honestly that's where all the money is, you know, then I think digital art has to be presented in a similar way. I think that one issue with this space is at first we had this, you know, I mean, we still do, like, obviously there's like this degen raw energy. And like, I love that. Like, it's like the EDM club vibe, you know, you go to NFT events and it's like, they're like blasting you with lasers and there's cool art on the wall. Sure. But it's like, is that the presentation that's really going to hook the traditional art world? Like, obviously not. You know, so it's kind of a clash of cultures. Like that was like that's like the renegade rebel culture of like, fuck traditional art, we're doing our own thing, this is digital art, it's completely new, like we don't need anything from the past, this is just totally new. And you know, with that we had like so many artists that were elevated at first for, you know, like it's like, why? You know, a lot of the time we can all look at the art that was, you know, selling for millions of dollars and be like, why though, you know? And I think that I mean, that makes sense. It was like a crazy you know, gold rush. It was chaos, and that was like one of the things about the space that I was attracted to. I love the energy of anything can happen, anything's possible, we're recreating society with decentralized principles, and you know, like you know, it's the Wild West, and that's really fun. But I think the space is starting to mature a bit. Like, you know, the artists that are sticking around and showing that they really believe in the technology, that they want to be here to innovate and invent, are rising to the top slowly but surely. You know, I think we've seen that with Sam Spratt, with Rafik Anadol, with tons of artists. And it's really encouraging. And, you know, I think there's a lot of people in the traditional art world that don't like how elitist and stuffy that world is, and also love sci-fi, love technology. You know, I met billionaires like this. Like, we're like, Chelsea and I are really good friends with this woman named Angela Ho now, and she's just the most down-to-earth, chill collector that I've ever met. And she's been in Web3 pretty much since the beginning because of the reasons I just mentioned. You know, she doesn't like, she kind of got bored with, you know, collecting all the traditional art. She's done that for decades, and she wanted something new and exciting and refreshing. And I think she loves connecting with the artists on a one-to-one basis. And that's something that's really been amazing about Web3 since the beginning, is that the collectors can connect directly with the artists, and the artists, I think, are much more open to that. Whereas in the traditional art world, there's always a wall between the artists and the collectors. And, you know, I think the auction houses create that wall to some degree, but maybe it's just a cultural difference. But I love that, you know, it's more like creating a really awesome fan base, and you know, appealing to those high-end one-of-one collectors, as well as your mid-tier collectors, as well as, you know, the people that just want an open edition, something that they can't afford much, but, you know, there's something for everyone. And I love that about, you know, Web3.
What's your favorite and least favorite aspect of that? There not being a wall, of being able to interface directly with your collector base. Yeah, what's your top and your bottom aspect of that relationship?
Well, I don't know, I'm all for transparency. I think that you know, I'm a person who's really open and humble, and I just like to connect with anyone and everyone. And I don't guard trade secrets or anything like that. I'm an educator. So I'm always completely open with all of my information. And I like to form real friendships online. I think that's a much better way to do it with your collectors, you know. My least favorite thing about the way that things are structured in Web3 is that we have to do all of the marketing and all of the outreach ourselves, right? Maker's Place, this experience I have with them, it's the first time I felt like I had a team backing me. You know, I've always craved an agent in this NFT world, someone that will find really great collectors, the right collectors for the art, that speak the language of, you know, these like people who are used to the traditional art world and can kind of bridge the gap. Like Cat, for instance, we were standing there and there was this guy that came through in a hoodie, and, you know, he was interested in some of the pieces. And she helped like solidify this deal that I would have kind of maybe not ignored this guy, but just let him like pass on through. But she like recognized that he had like a family crest ring that went back generations, right? And it's like, this guy is loaded. And he ended up purchasing the whole triptych because he wanted to set up the triptych in his home. So right there, I got an amazing collector who I'm now talking to. And, you know, and it's just like, I think that having someone that bridges that gap really creates a ton of like comfort for people coming from the traditional art world. You know, obviously if it's like people that got rich off of ETH, you know, I've got a lot of collectors like that too, who are more like, I don't know, just like into all the tech nerdiness and whatnot. And are, you know, and are maybe easier to just like get to know versus like literal billionaires that have like whole, you know, teams and ways of doing things surrounding them that are different. So it's like, again, it's a clash of cultures. It's two different worlds. You know, I know a lot of people that came into the space because they were already in Bitcoin and Ethereum, and those people are amazing and really easy to connect with, and have a different mindset and are way more, a lot of the time, just way more like, you know, like 42069, whatever, you know. I don't know, they're degens, you know, whatever. But and then, you know, on the other end of things, they're exactly what I was just saying, people that are, you know, coming at it from more of a fine art background, and they actually understand and appreciate art better. Like that's maybe what's lacking from the degen crowd, is that they often, even if they're like super well-intentioned, really, really nice people, they often know jack shit about art. So it's like, there's a very bipolar mix of people in the space. Yeah. And then, you know, obviously we can talk about like scammers and, you know, all the other negatives that come with the space, you know, opportunists like crypto bros that are just in it for financial gain and then get out quickly. Like, I think the mindset of traditional art collectors is much healthier. They buy things like knowing they're going to hold them for 5 to 10 years, you know, for the value to appreciate, for that artist's career to really blow up. You know, they think in much more long-term investment mindsets. And I think that's healthier for the space. So, but, you know, I think a mix of both cultures is great. I'm not saying that either one is right. It's just, that's what we have in front of us.
I think it's a fascinating discussion to really think about how this plays out, right? You have the rise of digital art in a sense that it finally finds a marketplace, which is the token, and that walks forward and puts digital artists in a much different position than they've ever been in before. It gives them a new pathway or a new avenue of opportunity. But I think the first stop along that pathway is to say, hey, the traditional art system doesn't make any sense at all. It's broken. Fees don't make any sense. You can look at that from how a gallery, you know, interacts. You can look at that from how an auction house interacts and hammer prices and all sorts of that stuff. Hey, this makes no sense. So the solution becomes, at first, we're going to do it all ourselves.
Exactly.
And then the artist is like,
we're going to completely reinvent the wheel.
Doing everything myself. It's from minting to distribution to communications to sales and then I think there's this dawning, and you shared it from your perspective, to say, hey, it was refreshing to have some of that taken off of my plate. And I think things end up settling in the middle, right? Exactly. Where each poll, sure, relevant for some people and it works for some people, but I think the majority ends up settling somewhere in the middle, where start to identify more productive splits, more productive participation,
Totally.
offloading X or Y responsibility because it's not
Exactly.
your particular strength, you know?
Exactly. That's exactly right. Like for me, some people love doing literally everything themselves, including the audio, for instance. Like if they're visual artists, they also adopt audio, learn everything about that. Like Raoul Marx is a great example of someone who knows how to do both incredible visuals and beautiful audio. And I'm just not that way. I'm like more interested in the visuals. So I have my composer and sound designer, sound wizard, Abel Okugawa, who does the audio for all of my pieces. And I really love collaborating in that way. And then same thing with Maker's Place, like they bring really genius ideas to the table that I wouldn't have had myself, and help elevate my art and present me in a way where I couldn't have done all of those things, like setting up all those screens, like making all of those deals. Like that's not, there's like producer roles and all of these other things that people are specialized in that I don't have as much interest in. And of course, there are going to be your savants like Ness Graphics, who's like an absolute genius at marketing and can completely pull it off all himself. But that's not me. Like I'm good at marketing. I'm not incredible, right? I'm good at presenting myself online, but I'm not. Yeah, I've never been the kind of person to like go viral on Instagram or any of the social media platforms. Like I could if I were looking to, but that's just not my interest. I don't love following the trends. I want to create the kind of art that I want to create, that comes from within, and that's my focus. Like the rest of it is a bit more burdensome to me. Yeah.
You do, though, have the coolest nickname in the entire space.
There he is. So yeah, that came from my tutorials. So I've done a lot of education over the years. My classes and tutorials have helped train thousands of artists in creating 3D art. That's, I think, why I became successful at first too with NFTs, is like everything you put out comes back tenfold. That's what I've always discovered in my career. And when NFTs really blew up, there were tons of artists that came forward and retweeted me and were like, this guy's legit. He taught me all that I know about 3D, about Octane, about these things. So yeah, that was absolutely incredible. Like that show of support, and yeah, so, and also I owe it to the people who I learned from at first. So when I started in 2011, there was this guy, Andrew Kramer. He's still really well known. I mean, I don't know if you've ever heard that name, but Andrew Kramer and Nick Campbell, like they were two of the first people who were just sharing all of their information that they had, like teaching everything. And I was just soaking it up like a sponge. But that attitude has always existed in the 3D community. And that's actually really lucky because a lot of other communities are really cutthroat. Like I've seen that from photography to the film industry. People get really competitive and cutthroat. But with 3D, I think we're all a bunch of nerds. And like I said, there's too much information out there to learn everything. I mean, it's true of any form of art. You can never be the very best. You can never learn everything. But especially with 3D, because it's so technical, you kind of have to keep a lot of information outside of your own brain, and like I have a database of like, oh, I know if I want to do that thing that looks like the cool rainbow shader, I can go to this one tutorial, and then about halfway through the guy shows the thing, so it's like you kind of just have references in your head for how to navigate whatever problem you need to solve. But yeah, that's why I think the 3D community is like so amazing. And so because of all of those tutorials that I watched like early on, that instilled that same attitude of free information sharing in myself as well. I've never guarded my processes because I know that I'm always going to be several steps ahead. And I know that I've got all of these years and years of experience and soft skills that I've accrued that are much harder to learn. I attempt to teach the soft skills, but even so, like even with my most advanced course, which took me a year to create, which is called Lights, Camera, Render, it's like 50 hours long. I basically show how to create a short film within 2 or 3 months, like from like complete beginner all the way up to, pretty advanced. So going through composition, lighting, and camera movement, that's like my magnum opus course. So, even with that, I'm not afraid of people like coming up and stealing my job, it took my job. Like, because I know that there's so much more that I've learned over the years that I can't even communicate in a massive course like that, you know? So I try and create like the kind of foundation for people to build off of, you know, like, and anyway, so getting back to your comment about my nickname, like, around, I would say 2017, 2018, yeah, I was releasing all these tutorials. They started really blowing up, getting like a few 100,000 views each. And then someone in the comments out of nowhere goes, "This guy's Octane Jesus," just because, you know, Octane's the software that I teach. It's that gear logo right there. Well, I guess for the people just listening, you can't see me, but yeah, it's a GPU render engine. It's a third-party GPU render engine that exists inside whatever 3D package you want, Cinema 4D, Maya, Max, Blender, whatever. But that's the software that does the lighting and the kind of texturing and makes things look pretty and, you know, calculates the light. And it's the thing I gravitated towards the most. So yeah, I was teaching this software, and obviously I have long hair, and because I was freely sharing so much information, I guess I got this nickname. And it like, when this person posted this comment, it kind of snowballed, and everybody just started calling me Octane Jesus. And it's like, I couldn't, at first I was like a little bit resistant to it, because I was just like, this is a weird turn of events. But, you know, it's like when the internet brands you with some kind of name like that, like, you
Game
just
over.
gotta, you got to roll with it, you know?
Yeah.
So, and then, you know, my friends like Smearballs, Nick Denbor, he's another really great NFT artist, works a lot with Beeple. He, like, out of nowhere photoshopped my face into the Jesus picture, and that was it.
It was a wrap.
And then, you know, for people listening, I've got a neon Octane Jesus sign behind me that my wife got me for my birthday.
It's so perfect.
So that completes the whole loop there.
I want to key in on something you said and pull it out, because it's so powerful of a mindset. You said, I'm paraphrasing you, but you said, I don't mind sharing everything, basically.
Right.
Because quote, I know I'll always be several steps ahead.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is a mindset that maybe not a lot of people have. But again, from my perspective, where I sit, I think it is such a powerful mindset. When you're that convicted in yourself, your process, your just general desire and thirst to keep moving forward. Yeah, you can share more freely with that headspace.
Totally. Absolutely. Yeah. Like I said, it's but I think it's like karma, you know, it's like you put that out there and it comes back tenfold in ways that you never expect. And it opens doors and creates opportunities. It opens doors and creates opportunities. Like, actually, this, you know, the whole infinite mirror room thing wouldn't have happened. Like, I wouldn't have discovered this whole art style and like gone deep down this rabbit hole if not for my teaching and my tutorials, because the whole thing started actually with a really simple job for the Latin Grammys, where they wanted me to design an infinite mirror room and put a chandelier in there and just create some style frames and call it quits. Like, and there's been so many of these moments throughout my career where, you know, I'll stumble on a technique and then do, you know, solve the problem for the client and then move on and never visit that ever again. But for some reason, this one just resonated with me. I mean, first I kind of like discovered like how to make it look a bit more realistic with creating bevels that catch the light, and just that simple thing, like making it look like an actual physical mirror room versus something just weirdly digital. But then after that, I was like, you know what, let's take this further. And I was doing tutorials. So I decided to make a tutorial based in infinite mirror rooms and I played around a bunch with like different lens types and weird effects that you could add to make it more artful, and created a bit of a like short, you know, just animation, short film type thing, sync to the music within the tutorial. And, you know, people loved it, but then I got all these additional jobs because of that tutorial. So like, first, this guy from the Republic of Georgia of all places hits me up, you know, on like through my email. It's like this guy Dimitri Gagoshidze. I'm like, is this a scam? Is this like a you know, like an African prince or something that's gonna try and steal my money? But no, he was actually creating an installation of real mirror rooms in Hong Kong, and he wanted pre-visualization for what that whole experience was going to look like. So that, and he had seen my tutorial, so he knew I could do the job. So I did that. And then same thing with Keith Urban. They approached me because of the tutorial, saying like, oh, I think you could take these techniques and make them a bit more colorful and psychedelic and do stuff for Keith Urban. And so it just kind of kept, it's like you open one door and then more and more and more doors open. And yeah, also along the lines of like being several steps ahead, it's not just that. That's maybe more of an egotistical way to look at it. It's also that I have all of my entire unique life experiences, and the way that I approach things is completely unique to myself, the things that I naturally focus on and gravitate towards. Like this art style in particular, like I don't know if anybody else likes this as much as I do. It's just because I love it so much that I keep going towards it and doing it for fun. It's like when I got back from Hong Kong, I was exhausted and we were jet lagged for like a whole week, but the first thing I did was kicked off another VR scene. Whereas with client work, I was like, fuck no, get away from me. So it's like, and yeah, I just know that I mean, that's one thing that I think my dad really helped me with in life is like, he's a philosophy professor. But he loves his work, and that's one thing I witnessed growing up my whole life is like, I knew that in order to really get to be the best at something, to be really successful, you absolutely have to love doing it. And ironically, for the first 24 years of my life, I was pretty much following the path that my parents set out for me, which was completely rooted in academia. Like I got a master's degree in neuroscience. I was in a PhD program and I switched down to the master's to get out. And I was really just following their, model for how I should live, and I just knew that I was a fraud. Like it was a terrible feeling, in grad school, like my friends were reading science papers for fun. And I was like, there's no world where I'm going to read science papers for fun. So I'm like, I know that I'm in the wrong field. So, thankfully, over the past, 10, 15 years, I've like managed to find that for myself, and I feel very lucky because of that.
I'd be remiss to not mention the sphere.
Yeah.
We have to talk about the sphere for a bit. So to leap forward, from that backdrop into another one of those really unique, interesting opportunities, or at least that's how I view it. But
yeah,
but tell it in your words.
Yeah, I mean, and this also kind of came from all the Web3 connections. All of these things like kind of combine and like the different worlds between client worlds and Web3 and concert visuals and all of these opportunities keep kind of cross-pollinating, as it were. But Ryan Hawthorne, who's a really good friend of mine, he and I did this incredible project for with Jia Aili, who's one of the most famous Chinese painters. I don't know if you remember this, but that went all the way to the Sotheby's Contemporary Evening Auction. And I was like alongside Banksy, Basquiat, Damien Hirst, Jeff Koons, like traditional auction with like gavels, like that was insane. And that's all thanks to my collector Triple X, who connected me with Jia Aili. And basically the brief was to, we were basically bringing his paintings to life as full 3D animations. And it was one of the coolest projects I've ever done. And it was really successful, especially because, the market had already kind of peaked and was kind of on the downturn. But Triple X actually tapped into his traditional art connections to make that sale happen. Anyway, so Ryan was one of the three artists. It was me, Ryan Hawthorne, and Raoul Marx. Like dream team right there. Raoul Marx has been like my hero since like 2012. With the True Detective titles and, Westworld titles and all the things that he's done. So it was awesome to work alongside him and alongside Ryan. So anyway, Ryan and I, we became friends through that project. But, obviously, like as NFTs started to become less sustainable for many artists, we started turning back to concert visuals world and client world. But Ryan hit me up out of the blue saying like, hey, I've got, this project for the Sphere through this ad agency called Phantom. But he basically, he had a good budget to work with and he wanted to assemble like a dream team of some of the best 3D artists. So it was me, Ryan, Harrison Vincent, who's not well known in the Web3 space, but he's an absolute genius. And then Jan Sladeko, who you might know him from like all of those insane astronaut animations he does.
Yep.
And then Fesk, obviously, really well-known artist. And then Brilly, who's another really great Web3 artist. So all of us, we created this 1.5-minute long Coca-Cola spot, and I got to do the viral moment, the most intense like part of it, which is this huge Coke pour that comes down the side of the spheres. Actually, it's 3 Coke pours in kind of a triangle that rotates around the sphere. But yeah, it went really smoothly. I was only on the project for like 11 or 12 days, and that was it. But yeah, I mean, it was such a good team. And yeah, I wanted to create something that was like really awe-inspiring, or just really, like crazy. It's like, you could do like your basic Coke pour at regular speed, but it wouldn't have the same impact. And for the sphere, because it's so large, you want things to move a bit slower. So I actually created the biggest sim I've ever done. It was a terabyte in size, which, may not mean anything to you, but like typically they're like, like 10 gigs, 20 gigs, maybe 100 at most. So it was this massive fluid sim with real flow for C4D. And yeah, I'd never done that before. I mean, I'd done some fluid sims, but I just tweaked it until it looked right. But I slowed it way down, so it feels like literal waterfalls of Coke, like that are filling up this sphere and like creating almost a hurricane of insane Coca-Cola. So yeah, really, really fun project. It was interesting, like designing for the sphere. It's very much like designing for VR. So basically, you put the camera in the center of the scene. And whatever, and then it's basically a full 360 environment, and that gets flipped from the inside to the outside. So it just gets inverted in the template. And this is actually brings me back to something you were asking earlier, is like how's it different designing for 2D canvases versus these massive, canvases? And yeah, a lot of the time it's like, how bright is it? Are we going to blind the audience? How slow do we have to make this go so it doesn't make the audience dizzy or whatever when you're actually looking at this thing in person? And then also, like, how do you pre-visualize what this is actually going to look like? So most concert visuals jobs, and it's no different with the sphere, they have a template that someone really a lot smarter and a lot more technical than myself has figured out, basically how to view everything in After Effects or in Cinema 4D all together. Because if you've got all these different screens, you need to be able to pre-visualize the whole experience with everything playing together at once, and basically recreate how all the screens are laid out in 3D, or how the sphere is laid out from all the different camera angles, and get it as close to how it would look in person, so that you can see it without actually having to go there, if that makes sense. And I did the same kind of thing for Hong Kong, where I created, quote unquote, the digital version of the experience. Like after I'd rendered all 4 walls, I put them back into a scene with the proper dimensions of that room, with 2 metallic figures watching the entire experience. And I basically like shot it, like quote unquote shot it, but I, rendered out a bunch of different camera angles with the visuals playing back on those walls, reflecting on the floor and ceiling and all that, and then cut that together into its own cinematic piece that is the token that represents the immersion room on the blockchain. Because how do you represent an experience on the blockchain? I feel like you have to have some kind of token that's representative of that experience. So essentially the pre-visualization of the experience is that token. So anyway, yeah.
Is the sphere the largest scale you've ever seen your work being displayed at?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's the largest scale that exists, right? It's like the biggest digital
fair point.
Yeah, it's the biggest digital canvas, that there is. I mean, it would be really amazing to go see it. And my next goal is to get, I'm not satisfied with, yes, I worked on the sphere. Yes, I'm proud of that, but I want to get my own personal art on there, just like Rafik did. And so now that I have the template, I actually ran my VR experience through the sphere template, because as I said, the VR is basically already prepped and ready for the sphere. So yeah, I was able to just pipe that through immediately. And now I've got like kind of a, I'm kind of trying to manifest this thing by putting it out there. Like, here's what my art looks like on the sphere. Here's how mind blowing it would look, And so my next step is, I don't think it's enough to show that template. Like, people don't have the imagination to connect. Like, here's these 5 views of the sphere on black, with the actual thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a scene of Vegas, in 3D, and then have the sphere playing back my work. So it really hits people over the head. This is the scale of what it would look like, So yeah, that's my goal. One of my goals. Yeah.
You're going to speak it into existence right here, right now.
Right. Exactly.
And just from where I sit, I can very convictedly say you're one of the artists whose work, from my perspective at least, absolutely belongs at that scale. I was telling you this, I think maybe even off recording before we hit go, but I was just saying how your work is the future. I mean, as the hardware improves, as we have more spheres and more places to
Right.
view things
Right.
at scale with immersive qualities, you're right there. As is Ryan Hawthorne, by the way.
Totally. Yeah. I think that's maybe just a quality of mine that I get kind of bored doing the same thing after a while. You know, it's like client work. I like NFTs were such a breath of fresh air because, like, even with client work, I was working on some of the most amazing canvases, Zed, you know, seeing my work huge and all that. But it's like, it wasn't about me, it was about the musician. And, you know, selfishly, it's like, I didn't know this, but I wanted to be an artist. Like, I think many of us that have worked in 3D for like more than a decade or however long, like, have this craving that we don't even know, that we want to do something more meaningful than client work. So yeah, that was the next step, is like discovering my own art, and then and my own style. And that took about 3 years. And now I feel like it's time to graduate again to, you know, moving from my art just being consumed on little devices and phones and something that, you know, people just swipe to the next thing with this instant gratification mentality, to something that you can't ignore, you can't look away from, because it's fully surrounding you, or it's as big as a building, or it's the, you know, it's the fucking sphere, or it's a VR experience where, you know, you can't help but fixate on it. It almost forces you to relax. It forces you to be present exactly where you are, because it's so you know, it's so mesmerizing. So that's kind of where I'm at, and where my next step of the journey is getting into these bigger installations, and yeah, creating experiences rather than you know, creating little 2D things.
The future of art, pun intended, is on your side, David.
Yeah, I hope so. And I think I'm well prepared for like the Vision Pro coming out and all of the, you know, insane advances. Yeah, man. Yeah.
I feel very much the same way. So let's
Cool.
let's go straight to the future.
Let's go. Yeah, straight to the future. Yeah, and actually, like, my ultimate vision for my art. So the coming back to Octane and Otoy, the CEO of Otoy is named Jules Urbach, and he's like the biggest like Star Trek nerd, and like he talks a million miles a second. And he's just so insanely passionate about the technology, and so like he's, in my opinion, like the right person to be running a company. You know, yeah, his heart is in the right place. But his ultimate goal is to create the holodeck, right, from Star Trek. And so let me jump back a bit. Like, I'm also friends with this guy named Arturo, who works for the Looking Glass Factory. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that company. They make like little holographic, they're kind of like infinite object screens, but they're holographic, and you can see them in 3D without having to have VR glasses or anything like that. And then, you know, he demoed this, like, I think it's like 65-inch TV that's the same technology, but it shows you some kind of like 60 or 80 views as you move your head around. So it just looks like it's jumping out at you. It looks like insanely 3D without having any kind of glasses. Now, I mean, rendering for that's going to be really hard, because you have to render all these different viewpoints. It's like you know, the Oculus on crack, because you have to have all these different views, but the effect that it creates is incredible. So that same technology is, you know, Jules is also very much into that holographic, these holographic panels. And so the idea behind the holodeck is take a whole bunch of those TVs, make a whole room out of them, and then you'll have essentially the holodeck, to where you're seeing completely in depth out forever, you know. And so that's, to me, that's my ultimate destination for one of my experiences, is like it would really feel like, you know, getting into a glass box and traveling to another dimension, because you would be able to see out into infinity, like completely surrounding you. Yeah, I think that's the future. So
let's go.
Let's go.
I will remember this conversation when that moment comes.
Sweet.
When I am standing in a glass box or have a glass box on my head, whichever is
Right.
fine.
Exactly.
I will
Right.
remember this conversation.
Totally. Yeah, that is a good question. It's like, is it going to be the device that you put on your head, or is it going to be the crazy like room that you go into, you know, or both?
Both.
You know?
Yeah, probably both.
Yeah. Like I was talking to the people at Maker's Place at the end of our, you know, awesome week in Hong Kong, and they were like, what do you want to do next? And it's like we were like brainstorming, like, what if we had a hallway that's got the, you know, that's fully LED, you know, that leads you into an immersion room, and then in the immersion room there's like several pedestals of VR headsets that are like wrapped in mirrors, and you like put those on to go even further into the art, so it's like this journey deeper and deeper into the art. And I'm like, fuck yeah. You know, like
let's do that thing.
Let's do that thing. And that's like, yeah, that's what's amazing too about, you know, Web3 and all of these opportunities, is like, as we graduate further and further as artists, we can think on these bigger scales, like what Beeple's done, you know, like creating this massive studio, creating these, you know, digital combined with physical, you know, boxes that rotate. You know, it's just like, we're inventors, you know, we want to be collaborating with people to create innovative and novel experiences for people to attend. And I think that people have like do crave these things without knowing it, you know, like Meow Wolf and, you know, Team Labs and all these, you know, like Art Tech House, all these places are successful and up and coming. And I think people love that shit. You know, they like, people love going to EDM festivals and like, you know, seeing like all sorts of crazy colorful LEDs and things, you know, and it's like all of this, it's like, yeah, it's just a display of technology and art combined, you know, in new and innovative ways. And yeah, that's where I'm headed.
Can't wait. Can't wait.
Sweet, dude.
Hey, who should be on the Future of Art?
Oh, lots of people. Though I don't know, I wouldn't know who you've already had on, but because I'm sure you've already like, you know, had like Raph and Gavin Shapiro and but I think, I don't know, there's like, when you say that, it's like I've got a list of like 100 artists that I absolutely adore. I would get Raoul Marx on if you haven't already.
I have not. I would love that. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be amazing. He would be one of my first picks for sure.
All right. Sweet. Octane Jesus, where can people find you? Where would you like to send someone who's listened and enjoyed the interview and now they want to dive deeper? Where do they go?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm most active on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. I'm just at David Ariew, so it's really easy. It's just my name. I'm also on Instagram with the same handle, though I'm not as active on Instagram. I'm still there. I don't have that strong of a love for Instagram or any of the Zuckerberg platforms anymore, you know. And my site is arievvisuals.com. So it's ARIEVVISUALS.com. So there's two V's in a row, which makes a W. So it's like a weird WV kind of thing. And yeah, that has all of the podcasts I've been on, all of my tutorials, all of my recommendations for other people's tutorials, all of my work. But I do need to create an NFT only site at some point in the near future. I've just been too busy, but yeah, that's about it.
That's it. Well, hey man, this has been enjoyable. It took us 2 years to get here. I don't want to take another 2 years before we do something again. So
no, yeah, I love this stuff, and I'm happy to be on anytime. Yeah, just it's really great to connect with you and like, you know, just talk about all of the madness in the space. And you know, I'm definitely down for, you know, if you need anybody, you know, with artistic perspectives or 3D or, you know, anything, you know, I'm definitely down to hop on again.
Let's go, man. Onward to the future. Appreciate you.
Hell yeah, dude.
Thank you for listening and for being part of the Future of Art. If you liked the episode, please rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite platform, and onward to the many conversations that await us. The Future of Art is produced by Artifex. Artifex, ARTIFEX, was created to honor today's top digital fine artists in 3 dimensions. Each artist's one-of-one work of art becomes a collectible 3D sculpture and centerpiece of an immersive world built in Unreal Engine, the creation tool of epic games. Search Artifex Viewer on Apple and download our brand new free app to experience the sculptures in augmented reality. And visit artifex.art/Unreal to literally step inside the art on your browser.